Why don't we drink other animals' milk? Right now, there's a good chance you have milk sitting in your refrigerator. Maybe you poured some into your coffee this morning, added it to cereal, or used it while cooking dinner. It feels completely normal. But here's something strange. Humans are the only animals that regularly drink the milk of another species, and we've been doing it for thousands of years. Long before supermarkets, long before written history, and even before the first cities ever appeared. So how did one curious decision by our ancestors become one of the most common eating habits on Earth? And if cows, goats, sheep, camels, and buffalo all produce milk, why do most people only drink milk from a few animals? To answer that question, we have to travel back to a world where milk wasn't a drink at all. It was survival. For almost all mammals, milk has one purpose. A mother feeds her young until they can survive on solid food. Then the milk stops, and that's the end of the story. For millions of years, humans followed exactly the same pattern. Babies drank their mother's milk. Children were weaned. Adults never drank milk again. In fact, if you had offered a glass of cow's milk to an adult hunter-gatherer 20,000 years ago, they probably would have looked at you like you had completely lost your mind. First, they would have had to catch a wild cow. Good luck with that. Ancient wild cattle, called aurochs, were enormous, often standing over 6 feet at the shoulder. They were fast, aggressive, and not exactly interested in sharing. Yeah, I'd probably run too. Everything began to change around 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. The climate became warmer. Massive glaciers retreated. Forests spread across landscapes that had once been frozen. Human groups started settling in one place instead of constantly moving. This was the beginning of agriculture, one of the greatest turning points in human history. People learned to grow crops. They domesticated animals, and without realizing it, they began changing themselves. One of the earliest animals humans domesticated wasn't the cow, it was the goat. Goats were smaller, easier to manage, and could survive in rough landscapes where larger animals struggled. Sheep soon followed. Cattle came later, bringing incredible strength for farming and, eventually, a much larger supply of milk. But here's the surprising part. Early farmers probably didn't domesticate these animals for milk at all. At first, they wanted meat, hides, bones, and muscle power. Milk may have started as an unexpected bonus. Imagine watching a nursing calf while wondering whether some of that food could feed your own family. It sounds obvious now. Back then, it was a revolutionary idea. Archaeologists have found evidence that people were processing milk surprisingly early. At sites in what is now northwestern Anatolia and southeastern Europe, chemical traces of dairy fats have been identified inside pottery dating back roughly 8,000 years. Those tiny fat molecules survived thousands of years, quietly preserving one of humanity's biggest dietary experiments. Think about that. A broken clay pot can still tell scientists what someone ate 8,000 years ago. That's our first wow fact. Researchers don't just guess. They analyze ancient residues trapped inside pottery using chemical techniques that distinguish dairy fats from other animal fats. It's like reading fingerprints left behind by ancient meals. But there was a problem. Most adults back then couldn't actually digest fresh milk very well. When babies drink milk, their bodies produce an enzyme called lactase. Lactase breaks down lactose, the natural sugar in milk. Normally, after childhood, the body slowly stops producing much of this enzyme. That was true for ancient humans, and it's still true for much of the world today. So why didn't dairy disappear? Because humans found a clever workaround before biology caught up. Instead of drinking fresh milk, they turned it into cheese, yogurt, butter, and fermented dairy products. Fermentation reduces the amount of lactose, making dairy much easier to digest. In other words, culture changed before genetics did. Our ancestors solved the problem with technology. Simple technology, but technology all the same. That's our second wow fact. Long before laboratories and modern science, people were using microbes to transform food into something their own bodies could tolerate. But then evolution stepped in. Somewhere around 7,000 to 5,000 years ago, a genetic mutation appeared in certain human populations living in Europe and nearby regions. Unlike most adults, these individuals continued producing lactase throughout their lives. Scientists call this trait lactase persistence. At first, it was probably rare, but during difficult years, it became incredibly valuable. Imagine a harsh drought destroying crops. Your grain harvest fails, but your cows, goats, or sheep are still producing milk every day. That milk provides calories, protein, fat, water, calcium, and other nutrients. Families who could digest fresh milk had another reliable food source. Over many generations, they were more likely to survive and raise children who inherited the same ability. This is one of the clearest examples of natural selection happening in relatively recent human history. One famous researcher who helped reveal this story is geneticist Sarah Tishkoff, whose work has shown that different populations evolved the ability to digest milk independently. In other words, lactase persistence didn't evolve just once. It appeared multiple times in different parts of the world wherever dairy farming became important. That's an incredible example of humans and culture evolving together. Scientists call this gene culture coevolution. Our habits changed our environment changed our genes, and our genes reinforced the habit. But here's something many people don't realize. Most humans today still cannot comfortably digest fresh milk. Globally, lactose intolerance is actually more common than lactase persistence. In many parts of East Asia, adults rarely digest lactose efficiently. The same is true across much of Southeast Asia and among many indigenous American populations. Large parts of Africa show tremendous diversity, with some pastoral communities having very high rates of lactase persistence while neighboring groups do not. Europe, especially Northern Europe, has some of the world's highest rates of adults who continue producing lactase. So if you're lactose intolerant, you're not unusual. You're actually closer to the ancient human condition. That completely flips the way many people think about milk. Now another question appears. If humans can drink milk from cows, why not from every other animal? Technically, some people do. Around the world, humans also drink milk from goats, sheep, buffalo, camels, yaks, horses, and even reindeer in certain regions. The choice usually depends on geography. People use the animals best adapted to their local environment. Camels thrive in deserts. Yaks survive at high altitudes. Buffalo flourish in wet tropical regions. Goats handle rocky hillsides with ease. But many animals simply aren't practical. A pig, for example, produces relatively small amounts of milk and is extremely difficult to milk safely. A deer is nervous and hard to domesticate. Many wild animals produce too little milk or become dangerously stressed around humans. Some species have milk with nutritional compositions that aren't practical for large-scale human consumption. Others simply can't be domesticated efficiently. In the end, humans didn't choose animals based only on taste. They chose them based on economics, behavior, biology, and survival. The best dairy animal wasn't necessarily the one with the best milk. It was the one that fit into everyday life. Archaeology helps tell this story too. At sites like Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, one of the world's earliest large farming settlements, evidence shows that people lived closely with domesticated animals thousands of years ago. Their daily routines weren't separated from livestock the way ours often are today. Animals weren't just food. They were transportation. They pulled plows. They provided clothing materials. They supplied fuel through dried dung. And eventually, they became renewable sources of nutrition through milk. That relationship transformed civilization. A family with healthy dairy animals possessed something incredibly valuable. Unlike meat, which required killing an animal, milk could be collected again and again. It was a renewable food supply. That simple idea helped support larger populations. Larger populations supported villages. Villages became towns. Towns eventually became cities. Milk didn't build civilization by itself, of course, but it became one important piece of a much larger puzzle. Today, the dairy aisle at the grocery store makes this ancient journey almost invisible. You see cartons, bottles, yogurt cups, butter, and cheese without thinking about the thousands of years of experimentation, adaptation, and evolution behind them. Yet every glass of milk carries a story of fearless farmers willing to try something completely new, a story of microbes quietly helping humans digest food, a story of genes adapting to cultural traditions, and a story of survival during some of humanity's toughest times. So here's the full picture. For millions of years, humans stopped drinking milk after childhood, just like every other mammal. Then, around 12,000 years ago, farming began. People domesticated animals. They discovered dairy. They learned to ferment milk into foods like cheese and yogurt. Later, some populations evolved the ability to digest fresh milk throughout adulthood. Over thousands of years, biology and culture shaped each other, creating one of the most fascinating examples of human evolution still visible in our daily lives. The next time you open your refrigerator and see a carton of milk, remember that you're looking at far more than a simple drink. You're looking at a partnership between humans and animals that helped reshape civilization, and at a habit that tells the remarkable story of how adaptable our species truly is. If you enjoyed exploring human history with Gray Head, I'd love to see you in the next adventure.